Guys and girls, and welcome to episode 85 of the FReality Podcast. This is a weekly VR, AR, and MR talk show, live streamed every Saturday on YouTube, Facebook, and on Twitch. You can tune into the show live at 7 p.m. in Europe, 6 p.m. in the UK, and 12 midday in Central US. You can also check out the audio version, which is available on iTunes, SoundCloud, and on Anchor. If you enjoy the show, please subscribe to our YouTube channel or leave us a nice review on iTunes, because that would really help us out. Happy Easter to everyone that's joining us live today in the chat or in VR in Altspace. We really appreciate you getting involved in the discussion with us each week. If you have any questions, comments, or feedback during the show, put them in the chat. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can. Now it's time for me to introduce you to the team. First up, this guy thrives in the wild and has the ability to talk to all winged animals. It's our resident bird whisperer, is Ep.85. How you doing, man? You all right?
Hey, Mike. How's it going? It's been a good week. I've just always taken advantage of the fact of being a what I like to call a corporate slave. If you are employed, then you have one benefit over entrepreneurs who work crazy hours to pump out YouTube videos and the like, which is holidays are holidays, which means that on a holiday we can do what we like. So I took my day off yesterday and turned that into a full-on playthrough of Falcon Age, which I was dying to do from before. So I think that's what Bird Whisperer Zim is now what I'm known for to Mike.
Exactly. I can't wait to hear your thoughts on it, actually, because it's one of those games that I intended to play this week, but just didn't get time. So I'm looking forward to hopefully playing it next week, but really intrigued what you think of it. But yeah, Zim likes petting birds, but this next guy likes flipping birds. He has the face of a criminal, but the voice of an angel. He's a lovable rogue. It's the Rowdy guy. How you doing, man? You all right?
The voice of an angel? Just because I did that one like singing bit? Oh yeah. Yeah, I'm all right. Just a bit hot here. I'm sitting here in my traditional wedding outfit. For people who didn't join last week's episode, so I got married in Nigeria to my I should call her my wife right now, but we did it with a traditional ceremony, and I promised everyone on last week's show that I would actually wear the traditional outfit today. I am still wearing shorts. I'm not going to show them because it's bloody hot and I'm pretty much roasting up here.
That's it. A Rowdy always keeps his word. You know, when he makes a promise, that's it.
Yeah.
Can't be broken.
Yeah.
So next up, huge congratulations are in order for this next guy as he's celebrating 10 years on YouTube this week. Is of course Nathie. How you doing, man? You all right? Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you, and that's a better intro than the last one where you called me Nathie.
Well, I've got to mix it up. You know, I can't be mean to you every week, otherwise people, you know, have a go at me.
They will think we have a beef together in some way. Although that is good for the views. After 10 years, you know, you become an expert in what people really want to see, right? So
yeah, we need to start some YouTube drama. That's what we need.
Yes,
spice up the VR industry a bit.
Yes, diss tracks. We're gonna drop some thick ass diss tracks on each other. Exactly. Or maybe we should make diss tracks where headsets are dissing each other.
I like that idea.
I see the chat has already started, by the way, because someone asked, "Wait, Nathie started when he was 4?"
Oh! Hey, but that means I still look young, so thank you for the compliment.
Yeah. So how was the last 10 years is a long time. How has that been? Just like to quick summarize it, you know, how's it been for you? This is all you've ever known, right? You've never done really anything else.
No, I did. Well, it sounds like I've been only a YouTuber from when I got born to now. That's not true, of course. I did have other jobs next to my YouTube years too. Yeah, it's been well, especially the last 2-3 years, because I'm now doing it full time, just like you. And before that, I was always, uploading videos for fun and just doing it as a hobby. And now it's like this crazy life, and where you fly all over the planet to meet companies, to check out new VR hardware, software, things like that. It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
Awesome.
Fun.
Awesome. I think it's one of those, like, it's a really privileged role to be in, I think, as well. Like,
it's and it's rare too, because there aren't that many people who are full-time VR content creators. So yeah, it's awesome to be able to make people excited for VR on a weekly basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, congratulations again. Awesome milestone. Last but by no means least, myself, the host of the show, Mike from Virtual Reality Oasis. In today's episode, we've got a packed show planned for you today. We've got some new Oculus Quest games, which were announced this week, making the wait for this headset even more painful as we get all excited about these games coming. Rowdy's going to give you a science lesson on why frame rates are so important in VR, a new segment of the show, which is going to be super interesting. Zim's going to give you the lowdown on the latest releases to look forward to next week, and I give you the details on another new headset coming to the market soon, the Acer Ojo Concept D.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Nice. Nailed it.
As if we didn't have enough headsets on the market already, but here we go, and another one thrown into the mix. But first, of course, let's find out what everyone's been playing and their highlight of the week this week. Feel free to join us in the chat, by the way. Let us know what you played. We can read some of those out. But yeah, let's go over to Zim first, and let's hear about his stories in the wildlands with the birds. I'm super intrigued.
Yeah, so I got a chance to play Falcon Age, which I've been kind of desperate to dive into since having met the creative director, Eka, and just the concept of the game I was really smitten with. It was like and this is all sounding very past tense, because I've had my heart broken a little bit by Falcon Age, actually, which is probably hard to hear. It's actually tougher for me to say it, because it's one of those games where, like, when you get your build up for it, I think it'll be for some people, but it wasn't for me, because the pacing of the story for me was just a bit haphazard. So the timing of some of the introduction of their game design elements was at the wrong time, or they didn't use them enough. And then other things like digging up a landmine with your bird, having to do that 20 times in succession on the way out, then do it on the way back. It felt a bit like, do you remember when you had Pokemon? You're like, God damn it, I just want to go back to the shop, and now I'm going to hit 20 different instances of battles, and I really don't want to battle right now. It's like, and then they designed around that later in later instances. It feels like that. It feels like there's certain aspects, kind of like if someone spends a long time on a scene and then they kind of force you through it 6 times. It felt a little bit like that. It was a symptom of that. And the game as a whole, I'd have to say, it's a bit like the Pepsi Challenge in that it tastes a lot sweeter in kind of smaller increments. Doing the whole thing, which took me probably 7 hours. I was going slow. But doing it all end to end, I really liked the Falcon. I don't think I got enough time with the Falcon or the accessories that I got for it. It was like a really quick fly through of the game without too much time with the bird. And as I said, I took my time. I didn't rush it. But the thing that really stood out to me, and I think they actually underutilized and didn't integrate in the game well enough, was their gardening system. Like, me and one of my kids had such a brilliant time just planting and harvesting fruit and making recipes to feed the bird. And I felt like that could have done a bit better.
Could have been a game in itself.
Yeah, it could be a game in itself, and it felt like really, really solid. And it wasn't something that I've seen in VR before done as well, like as colorful, as modeled. And it's not to say the game is bad. I just dropped it from a must-buy rating down to a consider for the reasons of the story going along. But aside from that, I love their art style. I love the world that they put you in. For me, the story just didn't feel right.
But was it that the story went too slow, or was it that the story wasn't good enough to keep you entertained, or was it more the repetitive element of it?
So, like, I wouldn't say the story was repetitive. It was more the game elements that some of which they kind of cranked the handle too many times on. But I'd say that the story itself came in like spurts. So you have 30 things of text to read through. And, I tend to like story, but I still find myself wanting to be like, okay, are we done with this interaction? And then it would come at you again. But after what felt like a DayZ moment of, I'm going to go through the arid desert walking with like little to do and little interactivity with the world that's so pretty around me. And then all of a sudden I've got like story rammed down my throat again. And with a finale that, if you see the final level design, felt very much like Quake 2 level design, very chunky, lots of blocks. So all in all, as much as I'd love to give 2 thumbs up to Falcon Age, I can only give it 1 thumb up. It's still a brilliant design. I still want to see more from the team. So I hope they sell enough to either do an expansion or something else, because I think that's what it needs. I think it needs, the same set of content again, to allow you to spend more time with your bird.
Yeah, so like the bird mechanics, from what you're saying, are solid, but it's just kind of the story pacing is kind of a bit off.
Yeah, and it's such a blow right in my balls, because I love the guys who made it and the way that it's made, and there's so many things that are really positive. It just feels, like you put a lot of good elements into a soup, and the soup just doesn't taste that great. That's where I sit with it right now.
Yeah, interesting, and we appreciate your honesty about it. It's one of those things when you really like the developers of a game, it's very difficult to be really critical. But it's kind of one of those things that comes with the territory of being like someone like us. But it's important to be honest. I think they appreciate that.
Like some people are going to really like this game, and it's going to be for them, and it's going to be that. I think this is probably for me in what I call the Grim Fandango territory. I spent years pining for and wanting to play that game, played it, and I found it the most tedious thing, and I found myself counting the hours, like, playing through it, and I was like, by the end, I was like, Manny, I hate you, man. It's just like, I don't want to play this game anymore. And so this, for me, it just sits in that territory. But I would absolutely go for whatever the dev team does next, for sure.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to try and play it this week. Hopefully, fingers crossed I get a chance. Yeah. So what about you then, Rowdy? What have you been up to this weekend? What do you want to share?
Yeah, I haven't made a video of it yet, but I actually dove back into Pavlov, because they recently did a huge update. I think it's called the Alpha update, but it's a huge update that unfortunately also broke a lot of the community maps. So they all need to be made compatible, I think, because a lot of the stuff that I used to be able to play, I wasn't able to play. I tried to dive into some TTT, some Trouble in Terrorist Town or Trouble in Trader Town, depending on which genre that you're playing, I guess. But I couldn't find that many maps that were working with the new update. I did still play a little bit, but they also made the Battle Royale mode in Pavlov, and I've played that actually now together with User ID and a couple of other people, and that was a lot of fun. Like, really a lot of fun. They redesigned the weapons as well. You can also add attachments and that kind of stuff to it. So really a lot of fun. Cool maps.
Is that native Battle Royale, as in the publisher, they brought it out? This isn't like a mod or something like that?
No, this is actually, those are also community maps. But the game mode now allows it for being played in a Battle Royale kind of style.
Sweet.
So they actually have they also added new player maps as well. So there's a lot of stuff that has been going on in that game, and for me, Pavlov really thrives on those like community maps. Like, they have added so many kind of things. You can play Minecraft maps, you can play like the old Counter-Strike maps, the new Counter-Strike maps. There's so much stuff that the community has made for that game. So I really hope that they keep on pushing that kind of thing on there as well. Yeah.
Nice. Also, to your interest, Zim, they have Left 4 Dead maps too.
Oh, excellent. For those who don't know, my wife and I clocked first and second ones on Expert, so there's only one map we ever didn't beat, but I love Left 4 Dead. No, it's next on my radar, actually, Rowdy, so I might hit you up because I want to try it with the Force Tube. I'm really keen to try Pavlov with the Force Tube.
I haven't tried it with the Force Tube yet, because I'm a little bit like, because I don't know if they have like a calibration tool like they do in Contractors, so that you can like calibrate the gun, and I don't want to like start messing up my calibration now, because I know that all my setups for Contractors that won't work anymore. So I haven't really tested that out yet, since I just wanted to try out the maps. But I do hope that they have some kind of calibration tool implemented, so that I don't have to change the Force Tube
Yeah, so like they don't have a calibration tool in Pavlov, and when I was testing those games out with the Force Tube, what I'd do is I would set it all up in all the other games and then calibrate it in Contractors Last. So it kind of works in all the other games, and then you set it up last.
But I don't know with the new update if they maybe added something.
Sure.
I just haven't tested it, so I don't know.
Also, Zim, the Force Tube does work with Pavlov, but you need to use their sort of like sound Rumble Rumble integration.
Yeah,
exactly.
I know the app. Yeah, actually, I was so confused when I got it because I was like trying to install the app and get it configured. I was like, you don't need that for most of the base games that are supported.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, and I just slipped up there, by the way. It's nothing to do with sound. It actually works from the Rumble signal from your controllers, and it translates that into Rumble with the Force Tube.
Oh, that's smart. That's smart. Yeah.
Cool. So, what about you then, Nathie? What have you been up to this week?
Well, first of all, looping back to the chat, Benjamin Priddle played Red Matter and To the Top. Red Matter is one that is
Love that game.
Top notch, exactly.
So good.
To the Top too, though.
True. Yeah, that's also true. Yeah,
It's
different genres, you know. Marchetto played Poker VR. Yes, I hope you didn't lose too much virtual monies. Sadly, Bradley played Final Assault. He said it's very addicting. If you like strategy games from a god perspective, then that's something you got to try. Factory Life played Standout, Beat Saber from Other Sons. That's a lovely combination right there. Buck played Assetto Corsa on Zim's server, apparently.
Nice.
Whoa, that's where the parties happen, you know. That's where the wild ass parties happen. And then last but not least, Gamertag VR picked up Pavlov for just £7. I don't know how much it is in dollars. Does anyone know?
Nice. That would equate to about
$10.
$10.
About $10.
Okay, well, that's not bad at all. And he's also eagerly waiting for his Pro Tube.
Nice.
It's got ProTube support. I mean, it has Gunstock support, so you can use a Gunstock in Pavlov. So you have an option for that. If you
Wait, so if I would buy an empty Gunstock and I would tape my Xbox controller on there, because as you guys said, it works with your controller, so that could do the trick with some flex tape.
Yes, of course. You can always try that. And then realize that you need to go and get new controllers.
Okay. Well, okay. You know, never mind. I did play Kablasta today.
The heck is that?
On the Nintendo Switch. Yes, with of course the blaster.
Kablasted.
Let me show it again.
Sounds like that Nickelodeon program, Kablam or whatever.
Well, no, it's something like that. It is for kids in the end, and for kids at heart. But you got to use the blaster, and it's a co-op game, so you got to play it with someone else. And most Nintendo Labo VR games out there are for one person only, but this is one that you can play with someone else. And how am I going to explain this? Because it might sound a little weird. There is a swimming pool with hippos in there. And every player gets some fruit that they have to shoot into the hippos' their mouth. And when you then hit them, they will actually come to you because they're like, hey, I get some food from you, so let's be friends. So every time one player needs to do that, and when they miss, well, they don't get any points. But if they do feed the hippo, they get a point. And you constantly need to do this one at a time. And you have different kinds of fruit. So you have a banana, you have a pineapple, a melon, and every fruit has its own ability. So a banana is a boomerang. A melon creates this big explosion in the water, so you can draw the hippos towards you. And there are a lot of physics involved too, but we had so much fun. We played this for like, I don't know, an hour, and we were just laughing our asses off trying to win. And there is so much to it, because at the start you're playing it and you're like, I just got to shoot a bit, right? But then you're like, well, wait, you can do this too. And whoa, I just saw that. Did you see that? So you're discovering this thing together, and it was super social. I haven't had so much fun in a long time in a co-op VR experience. And it took me like 5 minutes to hook up, because you slide your Switch in there, you put your Joy-Cons in the blaster, and bam, you're ready to go. And that's also VR, you know?
I love how your serious face when you were like talking about it, and how you were like seriously talking about what you had to do. And the banana, of course, is a boomerang.
Yeah, so, but this was just great. I think the Nintendo Labo VR kit deserves way more love. I feel like it has a slow start at the moment, but seriously, if you have a bunch of kids or you're an adult with a Switch, go check it out. Seriously, it's amazing. It's so cool how you can build this yourself. You can make your own games too. It's everything together.
Yeah,
it's cool.
I totally agree about the Nintendo Labo. You know, it's got so much content and value for money for what you pay. And funnily enough, like my experience of the week that I wanted to share is a Nintendo Labo VR kit as well, because, you know, I've been spending a lot of time this week using the whole range of Labo kits after just last week testing the Blaster quickly. And I ended up building them all, trying out all the different associated games and experiences. And the one I wanted to talk about was the Elephant, actually, because it was one of the kits out of the whole range that I was least interested in. I was like, yeah, the Elephant, yeah, it looks kind of weird. But it actually turned out to be my favorite kit out of all of them. So I thought it was worth talking about. And the Elephant has got something really special about it that the other kits don't have. And that's that it's actually got 6 degrees of freedom movement in the trunk. And this is super clever engineering on Nintendo's behalf, because the Joy-Cons actually have like internal chipsets that can work out how far they are from each other. And by using that and the rotation data, they can basically turn the end of the trunk into a 6 degrees of freedom controller, which is super smart. And basically with the Elephant, you get 2 experiences. You get one called Doodle, which is basically paint in VR, a bit like Tilt Brush, where you can paint and then manipulate the sculptures or painting whatever you make. But the one that really sort of grabbed me was a game called Marble Run. And basically it's a physics-based marble puzzle game where you've got like a marble that drops, and then you've got a goal that you need to get it to, and you can manipulate different like objects and bits and pieces to create the path so it sort of drops back into the goal or a series of goals. And they've got like 100 of these little puzzles to solve.
Jeez.
And a level editor that you can actually create your own puzzles as well. So there is just like so much content.
Jesus.
But out of all the Nintendo Labo experiences, it was the one that I spent the most time in. And I was just like completely sucked into solving these little puzzles. Like I love puzzles in VR anyway. And I was kind of like thinking like, I'd love a game like this on PC. And thanks to Eric Hartley, a friend of the show, he said that there is a game out there that is actually very similar on PC called Gravity Lab. I'd never really heard of this game before. And when you look at Gravity Lab, you think Nintendo basically ripped this game off. Like it was the one that started this whole genre, and Nintendo saw this and sort of took their sort of design inspiration and created their own version of it for the Labo. But yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. So if you're interested in getting Labo kits, you know, either get the complete kit or, you know, maybe get some of the kits that interest you the most. But definitely I would say I would agree with Nathie in that, you know, there's a lot of content on these Labo kits that are well worth checking out.
It's funny, if you look at the Elephant, I'm showing it right now, there are like these white dots on its face, and those are the tracking points. But first you think like, oh, these are just some cute eyes and it's a part of the... But it does more than that. So they blended it in so nicely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super smart. It's such a smart system. I can't sort of like rate it highly enough, really. But again, like, you know, VR, you know, enthusiasts aren't going to be interested in this product, and that's absolutely fine.
I did feel a lot of backfire at some parts within the VR bubble of like, yeah, but this is cardboard and this is not selling VR. It's giving people a bad experience. This is one of the best VR experiences I ever tried, and it's also one of the best headsets I have ever tried. So,
wow.
Yeah, there you go. And I'm super interested to see the updates for Mario Odyssey and Zelda when they drop on the 26th, because they're getting free VR updates that utilize the goggles. So I'm super intrigued how that's going to work. But yeah, you know, I think Nintendo Labo VR is legit. It's one of those things that you really need to try, but it's ideal for kids and enticing newcomers into virtual reality.
And it shows that you do not need a crazy high resolution, a big field of view, or positional tracking to make the VR magic happen. So,
agreed.
I'm curious, with the contact hours you've had on a mic, have you had any symptoms related to the 3DOF of feeling something odd in your stomach?
Oh, using the Labo?
Using the Labo, yeah.
No, not at all, not at all.
No.
Like to be fair, there are there's a lot of motion blur when you turn your head, and the resolution is pretty, meh. But
Borderline,
like Nathie said, it's about the game experience and having fun with that,
Yes.
There's a lot to offer there.
What Nintendo did with all these Labo VR kits is they introduce haptics. So with every VR headset you play, you create your own effects, and these effects make sure you don't get sick. So you feel wind, or you feel the feedback of shooting something, and that adds to the immersion, and it also tells your brain like, hey, listen, it's okay, it works, it makes sense, and so that's a big part of this illusion they are using, I feel like, and of course seated is one of those main things that works straight away.
I think those anchors are really important, and playing with them in a kind of an R&D shop, like a lot of the last 4 or 5 years has been those tests, but we're still seeing some kind of interesting technologies come out in that space, and it always makes me kind of grin when I see a new one, and it's like, oh, no one thought about that one before, and now they've implemented this, and it's that coalescence that, like Paul Merlucky originally said, like our controller system will eventually merge into the perfect controller, in the same way that gamepads have kind of come to the same shape, but we're definitely still doing that when it comes to VR comfort options, because from title to title, one has 80 options, one has 2. It's like there's so many different things out there.
So to wrap this up, I just see that Nimzo is in the chat. He has been one of our guests in the show too. Sadly, his Mario VR experience, the one that you can play in first person, had to be taken down because, well, Nintendo was kindly asking him to do that. So you can't play it anymore. But there are still videos on the internet, of course, and he made some videos too on his channel. So if you still want to relive what he made, then check it out. It's Mario in first person in VR with this genius way of locomotion.
Yeah, I think that's a real shame, and I know that Node recently played it, maybe because they'd played it, got a lot of attention. That Nintendo all of a sudden hang on a minute. That's a real shame to hear that though, Nimzo.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's just kind of one of those things, the risk you take when you sort of work with an IP like that. Interested to know if Sega approached you for the same reasons with the Sonic one. Maybe let us know in the chat. But let's move into some.
That one's actually my favorite. I like that one even better.
Yeah. And Sega, if you're listening, no.
Exactly. So let's move into some quick news then, and let's talk about some news from Sony this week, because Sony invited Wired to their sort of headquarters, and they were talking about the next generation PlayStation, which is super interesting. And I don't think it's a huge surprise that Sony are working on the next generation console, but there were quite a few interesting details about the console that were kind of dropped in this article. Firstly is that the new console won't be coming in 2019, more likely coming in 2020. Interestingly, though, game developers already have their hands on these kits, so they're already creating games for the new system, which is awesome.
Jesus.
Apart from the obvious upgrades in like sort of GPU, CPU, the new console will be able to handle ray tracing, lighting technology. It's also going to have like a special SSD hard drive, so loading times are going to be practically non-existent, which is kind of cool because, as we know, loading times in VR just suck. It's kind of one of those real immersion-breaking experiences. There's nothing worse than waiting like 10 to 15 seconds for a loading screen in VR. It's way more painful than on a normal sort of pancake game, put it that way.
Yeah.
But when Wired asked Mark Cerny, who's the lead system architect over at Sony, if there will be a next generation PSVR alongside the new console, he replied, "I won't go into details of our VR strategy today, beyond saying that VR is very important to us and that the current PSVR headset is compatible with the new console." And that's really interesting. So the original PSVR will be compatible with the next generation PlayStation, and clearly will be supported for years to come in the future. So what do you guys think of this? This is like super awesome news, I think.
Exactly.
Nice.
That's it. I mean, like what an underscore, right? I mean, to know that now does an amazing thing, because if you got the pocket change for it, like we've kind of recommended in several states, right? If you've already got PC VR and you're kind of happy, and maybe you got money in your hole burning a hole in your pocket, then why not go for the PSVR? And it'll have some good resale value because of the forward compatibility. So even if you went for it today and you played some stuff and then you bought new headsets when they land out, you could probably resell that thing at Christmas or Q1 next year and still get most of its value back. Like it's like it's like getting a massive freebie dropped in on the news channel. So absolutely great news. Great news. I didn't need to know about the new headset. Keep that secret. That's fine. But this one, like, who does this? Who tells you that it's got forward compatibility? That was not a mistake. That wasn't like Wired, bending that out of them. They had a plan to release that information, and I think that's really a great strategic move by Sony.
Yes, it shows that they know what they have in their hands and how much value it has. It's like extending the life of this VR headset. It's something that you got to do in the state the VR industry is in right now. Like even selling a new headset is going to be a nice add-on. But even if they wouldn't for a while, it's still a solid headset to buy. The first one, the PSVR. So
yeah. And I think in my mind, it's likely that they will bring out a second generation PSVR, with better tracking, better controllers. But it's just that they're saying, if you want to play seated VR experiences or, the older experiences, you can still use the original headset. And I think that's awesome. And I think exactly what Zim said, if you've been on the fence about getting one and sort of thinking, maybe I should wait for the next generation, this is like the sort of news you've been waiting for, really, to sort of pull the trigger.
Also, I think it's reiterating a little bit what we've been saying is that maybe in terms of like technology and in terms of like advanced VR, this is maybe the least popular headset. But if you look at how many they've sold, 4 million and counting still, that's like an insane amount of headsets that they're selling. And they're actually doing what we've been saying so often as well. They're focusing on content, and they know that they might not have the most advanced virtual reality device in their hands, but at the same time, they're delivering content that everyone just wants to play. So if you want to play that kind of content, you need to get that PlayStation VR. So they're not focusing that much on like making that new generation, but they want to use the technology that they have right now and optimize that for every virtual reality game. And the perfect example for that was Static to me still. They managed to take a game which you need to use the controller, very basic kind of movement system, but they implemented that so smart into that game, using that technology up to its limit, just to get a great gaming experience. And I really want to see Oculus and HTC Vive doing that more as well. Really take advantage of every little thing, because we said it before as well. We still don't have, even though the Oculus controllers can do it, the finger movements, but the games that can actually use that, we can count them basically on like two hands, which is not that impressive.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like all the other headsets and their controllers have never been used to their true potential, and Sony has really shown to like put every everything into it to get the best out of their hardware. Yeah. And I've been saying this so many times, like First Contact, for example, for Oculus, and the lab for the Vive was the blueprint of like, listen, this is what you can do with it, but almost no one took the advantage and used that. Hopefully that is going to change in the near future. But PlayStation VR is constantly innovating still. I mean, how long is it ago that Astrobot came out? I don't know. It's not that long ago, and they showed again like, oh, this is something new, and now it goes giant as well, where you're like, whoa, there's even more I can do with this. And now being straightforward to your community and be like, listen, if you want to get this PlayStation 5, everyone knows it's coming. You can play with your VR headset on it, and they give a reason to move on for all these users. Like if they wouldn't do that, they would lose a big chunk of their community straight away. So making this compatible with the new console, super smart move.
Strategy-wise, right? Like also the timing, because obviously you can see a threat coming into that territory. You got your base of 4 million headsets sold, right, in terms of PSVR, and you've got this little storm front coming, which is kind of 1.5 and 2.0 headsets coming out, and they're basically saying, you're okay to stay with Sony. You know what I mean? Like, but like take a flash gun and shoot it off and go, look where we are, lads, right? We've got Sony supporting. We've got Nintendo supporting. Of course, Microsoft is still kind of tittering around on the side, but like that's beautiful for gamers to have that kind of support VR wise. I mean, like you can feel like the gates starting to like bulge and press, and the crowds are coming. Like it's great. It's really good.
Yeah, no, I am so happy that Sony has been carrying the VR industry for a while now with all their content, and hopefully later down the road, Nintendo, Facebook, Valve, and all those other parties can work together and really, make the magic happen together. Because it's not, let's say in the long run, it's not good to have Sony to be having to carry the industry, because it sounds kind of badass because they sold so many headsets, but it's also this worrying thing that they had to drag everyone with them for the last few years. If you look at E3, if you look at Gamescom, if you look at PAX, PlayStation is always there to save us all, to preach VR, to a standard that no one else can really get close to.
I do think though the levels will change a little bit with the release of the Quest. I think Oculus will catch up with them. And talking about the Quest, we had the Quest Countdown blog this week announcing some new games that are coming to the Quest when it launches. Again, these aren't necessarily new games, but they're games that we know and love that are definitely welcome on the system.
Yes.
So we've got Tilt Brush, which is great for sort of budding artists out there creating sculptures and artwork in a 3D space that's truly magical. So that's going to be really cool. We've got Thumper, which is like a classic, what do they call it? Rhythm violent game, which is a lot of fun. You got Fruit Ninja again, which is a classic. Bait, which Rowdy's dad is a huge fan of. And
I love
fan
that
of well.
one. I'm not gonna see that headset for weeks probably.
You've got Rush, and you've also got Angry Birds.
Yeah. So I agree. I think that the Quest will have a big impact on the VR market, but then Oculus does need to have a good marketing strategy, because if they are going to sell this headset like they did with the Go and the Rift, it's not going to take off. But if they try new things and they really have their marketing, as I said, on point everywhere in the world, not only America, also Europe and other parts of the world, then yes, it's going to have a big impact, and a lot of people are going to buy it. But if the marketing part doesn't add up, then it has less chance to succeed. That's the truth.
I don't know about that, because I think there's such a hype bubble around this headset right now that I think
in the VR bubble it is, because we're all in this VR industry. Outside of that, if I'm asking around like, hey, do you know what a Quest is, or do you know what an Oculus Rift is? People don't know. In the VR bubble, it's a hype, but outside of that, it's not happening.
That's also You also saw that, for example, with Beat Saber, because I know a lot of people that played Beat Saber, but they had no idea that it was called Beat Saber. Like I've had like 4 or 5 people that came up to me and said, oh, I play virtual reality. There was this game with these I had like lightsabers and blogs, and it was like music everywhere. I said, yeah, don't worry, I know which one you mean. Come to my place, we'll play it again. But I think that's kind of like similar with the Quest that is going to happen. Like a lot of people are going to try virtual reality, have their first virtual reality experience on these devices, because they are so mobile, because they are sixed off, because they are so easy just to put on and play with. Yes. So I do think that a lot of people are going to have this a little bit as the standard for trying virtual reality.
But it's roaming, and it's a compelling experience. And
that's going to the price on their side, huh?
And the price is on their side. But like, it's going to go from house to house. You know what I mean? This is the console. Like the Go doesn't quite make it over the edge of, do I want to show this to my grandmother? Do I want to show this to my cousin? It's kind of a little bit more of a personal device. Whereas Quest, I see as the first headset that really pushes past that threshold, is very shareable. And actually, there's one, I think, on the list, Mike, that I didn't hear you I didn't hear you say, but I think is another really cool one, and it's cross-buy across Go and Quest, which was announced recently, which is virtual desktop. Yeah, so again, going back to the mobile part, Guy Godin, who made this app some years ago, it keeps refining it, keeps making it better. And the thing is, to be able to have like a library of videos at home, or a game at home that you want to play, and then you go to a friend's house, and over Wi-Fi you're connecting remotely back to your desktop, and then be able to show that stuff off. It's like, it's got so many applications. Like me as a server admin, we were talking about Assetto servers and things like that. being able to remotely connect and just check on a box and see if everything's like looking okay is great. And you can't do that with anything else. It's not easy to do it without like going, I'm going to open up my PC to the internet and, allow a remote desktop or go through a NAS or something like that. So Quest is just it's like the Swiss Army knife of VR. I feel it's got so many different facets and niches that it's going to perform well.
I totally agree on that. It's just that most people outside of this VR bubble we are in are not aware of the Quest, don't know what it is, have never heard of standalone. They see if they do know what a headset is, they don't even know the difference between all these headsets. Yeah. Like, that's what I've been saying before. This is something I said at PAX too. Oculus was constantly at PAX trying to educate people. What is a standalone headset? What is a PC headset? They were doing giveaways to learn people what the difference was and getting them excited for that. So again, marketing is a big part of this. And we can say whatever we want about this headset, like, it was so fun. And, the Quest is an amazing HMD. But if they are not able to spread that message to this consumer base that has never been interested in VR in the first place, that's what you need. And then it's also important to have these demo stations. I have never seen a demo station in my life here in Europe. And we already heard that Best Buy is going to prepare them. Hopefully we are also going to have some in Holland. Hopefully we're going to have some in the UK, in Belgium, in Spain, and everywhere, everywhere around the world. That needs to happen. Needs to happen.
But I think as well, like, as important as that is, I think the reason why this headset will ultimately succeed is through word of mouth and people saying that this is a great experience and being able to take it and actually showing their friends without having to invite them over to your place or something like that.
And one additional point here, Mike, because I was just rolling the Tilt Brush video, and that obviously is one of the announced pieces of software that's going to be launching for Quest. Tilt Brush was amazing when it dropped originally, like on Vive. And you saw creatives springing up who otherwise, they weren't gamers. You could tell weren't gamers. They were creating something that was like incredible, and then sharing it on their timelines and tweeting it out and all that. And maybe I'm wrong here, but you guys can tell me. I've felt that dip a little bit. Like, I haven't seen as much retweeted, posted on Reddit, like, here's an amazing scene or whatever. And I'm really looking forward to the creatives kind of coming alive again, because again, you don't have that capability on Go as your kind of grab and go headset, but on Quest you do. And whatever file that is getting uploaded to a laptop or whatever, I think it really, it's like the River Delta. It just opens up this to so many people who can't afford a PC to run a headset like a Vive or something like that. I mean, if you're an artist, there's that old adage of starving artist, right? Yeah. I mean, I'm expecting to see a bloody hell ton of more artwork drop, and I hope we do, because I love their stuff when they create it.
Yeah, agreed. And just to quickly round up us talking about the Quest, there's been a lot of posts on Reddit and Twitter this week about like release dates and stuff. I know that Game accidentally sort of opened up pre-orders for it, and they said it was launching at the end of May. And then I saw someone else accidentally opening up pre-orders that said December. I just want to reiterate, we don't know any more than you do in terms of release dates, but we've been saying this like from the beginning. It's likely that this headset is going to release during Facebook F8, which takes place between the 30th of April and the 1st of May. And we're like two weeks away from that now. So
yeah, it's quite obvious, although
it seems like the right moment.
Yeah,
I think you'll get a date then. Whether or not it's going to be purchasable that weekend is a question, right? So we'll see.
Yeah. The Zuck is holding this headset in his hands. Is like, it's now available. Go buy it. That's what's gonna happen.
Everyone rushes out of the hallway, and it's like an empty hallway.
Everything the man holds sells to a certain point, so makes sense.
But that's where I'm jealous of people that are in the US, because this is what happened with the Go. Yep. He said that it was for sale now. People could go out and go and pick one up at Best Buy.
Took 4 days.
For us suckers in the US and UK, we had to patiently wait by the letterbox for the mailman to deliver our parcel that we ordered through Oculus directly.
Did you call us Zuckers? Is that what we are now? We're Zuckers. I get it.
Zuckers.
We're Zuckers. Zucking on the...
Hopefully the VR audience grows in Europe too, and before you know it, they have to announce headsets in a different part of on the planet. Who knows?
So let's jump from one hype train to another one.
Oh God!
Straight onto the Index. Because we got a bit of news about the Index, like the Valve Knuckles this week. We didn't get any more information about the headset itself yet, which, I'm still super intrigued about. I'm really excited about this headset, but I'm desperate to know what that cutout in the center of the headset is for. Like, it's like watching a Lost episode, on a cliffhanger, and then you're just desperate to find out what happens next. You're trying to work it out in your mind, but you can't. It's always way too clever, for you to figure it out. So I'm just desperate to wait. But we're going to know more details on the 1st of May, which obviously coincides with everything that's happening with Oculus as well, which is kind of interesting. But I wouldn't be surprised if we hear more details about the Valve Index this week coming, because there's been some rumors that, VR press are being, sent to some sort of secret event. It could be something completely else, but it could be something hosted by Valve. There's also some rumors from the Valve news network that Valve have got some press builds being put up on SteamDB for Valve Index stuff. So it could be that there's a press event, so there could be some news dropping. So, keep pressing F5 for the information, and maybe next week we'll get it.
But wait, this is the same company that has been leaking Half-Life 3 things like everywhere for the past how many years. So
of course,
how much can we take from these rumors?
I think the fact that I saw some VR news outlets saying that they were going to go to an event somewhere that was super top secret got me a little bit triggered. But again, take everything with a pinch of salt. But
well,
anyway,
wouldn't it be strange to not have the press write about your product up front and then kind of prepare some good articles that are really informing people what they are going to get into? I think it makes sense. It makes total sense.
Exactly.
It's just you can't say hey guys, we're going to the Valve office and we're going to test some stuff and we're going to write about it now. No, it's going to come out the moment when they drop the news. So they kind of need to sync up now.
Exactly.
So NDA is confirmed.
What we do know is that Valve pushed an update to the Knuckles controllers software. They posted it on Steam. Interestingly, they still refer to these controllers as Knuckles controllers and not Index controllers. So it could be that the headset is called the Index, but the Knuckles are still called the Knuckles. But anyway,
that'd be funny.
Who knows? But the update log states it's all about finger tracking. This update adds logic for detecting and adapting to a wider range of hand sizes and finger placements based on finger activity over time. This feature only applies to DV controllers or newer. And having seen some videos around the new update, I know sadly, but Bradley, who's in the chat, did a nice video showing sort of the brand new tracking of these fingers. It looks super nice, and it's got me even more excited for this headset and controller combo.
Indeed.
So I don't know what you guys think of this.
Especially because with slower movements, that it's still shows that's really impressive, I think.
And hand size alterations that they mentioned in the patch notes, I think, is a very important thing for a lot of people with smaller hands. I think this has been coming out of testing. I knew Mike, you'd wave at that one. I don't know. It's
small
Knuckles. The one thing is I just want to touch them. I want to put my hands in them. Please, can I just try them?
I think the thing that impressed me the most that I never really sort of noticed before maybe was, we know that the Oculus Touch has capacitive touch sensors, so you don't necessarily have to press the thumbstick, but your thumb will be represented near it in VR, the same as your real thumb is. And it's the same with these Valve Knuckles, in that you can be slowly bending your finger, not even touching the controller, but it senses that movement and represents it in game, which is just super satisfying to watch. So if you haven't checked out the video, go and check out Sadly But Bradley's video showing these sort of finger movements, and you can check out how fluid it looks. Looks very impressive indeed. But of course, if we get any news next week, we'll be talking about it on next week's show. So let's round up the quick news this week with Superhot. Some really cool news from the Superhot team, and that is that Superhot VR has sold over 800,000 copies across all the VR platforms. It's available on Oculus, the Windows Store, Steam VR, and PSVR. And the VR version of the game has generated more revenue than the original version of the game, the traditional pancake version of the game, which is incredible. Yeah.
It's just awesome because this is one of those games that was actually made before VR was a thing. Yep. But if you look at this game, you're like, this makes perfect sense for virtual reality, right? Yeah. It makes perfect sense for virtual reality.
Man, that brings me back to the good old days. I tried Superhot when Oculus just announced the DK2, and I had to play this with a gamepad, and they had this positional tracking going on, and that's what they were showing. So I had to shoot with my gamepad and use my head to evade the bullets. Man, good old times.
It's really super cool, right?
Super cool, super hot.
Super hot, yeah. But it's still one of my favorite games in VR. You know, graphically it doesn't look anything amazing, but I think that's the coolest thing about it. It's just the way it makes you feel like a total badass.
Yes.
And for those getting the Quest, you know, this is a day one release. You know, in my opinion, it's a must-buy title if you're going to get a Quest. So.
If you haven't played it already, then I would agree with you, because it's another one of those, like I slotted in with Beat Saber. It is a high-performing lo-fi game that's going to make you feel like a badass. And why don't you want to feel like a badass?
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's the closest thing, other than maybe Sariento VR, that makes you feel like Max Payne. You know, for anyone who has played Max Payne, like I have definitely wanted, and someone out there is going to do it, wanted to like leap and gun at the same time. That's probably not a good idea unless you're in around a foam pit. But there are foam pits in the world, so go out there and do that.
And Superhot also has these extra game modes, so it has a lot of replay value too. I think it has some kind of survival mode and some other ones that you can unlock when you play the single player. So after you finish the single player, you can just go back to levels and spice them up. So I think they recently added that, or recently, that's almost a year ago now. But it has a lot of game modes too. So it's not something you play once; it's something you can play again if you feel like it. And talking about Sariento, I'm not sure, maybe this is a rumor, but as far as I know, they were planning to bring Sariento to Quest as well.
Brilliant. Interesting. Because that's also one of those games that you need like full freedom to be playing it like legit.
Yeah, the devs went to the office of Facebook, and they were showing off the Oculus Quest there, like it's a long time ago, and they were so impressed that they were like, we gotta part this over, because you know the Quest is going to bring us closer to the tipping point of VR going mainstream, basically.
Yeah, and that's the thing, like if they've sold 800,000 copies already, you know, it could be with the Quest they achieve that 1 million sales in VR, and I hope they do it, because I want a sequel to this game. I said to, you know, Dev Callum, you know, Callum Underwood recently via Twitter, you know, like, what I want to know is when you're going to make another one. And he was like, well, you know, maybe sometime.
Yes.
But yeah, call it Super Cold or something like that. I'd be down with that.
God,
and make some merch too. I want Super Hot merch.
Oh, I want Super Hot merch as well. He was wearing a hoodie
we all
once.
want Super Hot merch.
Yeah,
We've said this before in the episodes.
Sponsor the podcast, and then we can all like be sitting here with our branded Super Hot merch.
Given we're all kind of fans of the game, could we just do a congealed Super Hot all coordinated together? I'll go 3, 2, 1, and we Super Hot. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Super hot.
So yeah, that is Super Hot coming to the Quest, and they sold 800,000 copies. So congrats to the team. Let's move it over to Zim then for this week's game releases. The games that we should and maybe shouldn't be playing in VR. super excited to hear.
Yeah, I love this part. This is my one of my favorite parts, is just kind of sharing this stuff with people. So I'm going to start off with a game that, let's say, unlike Falcon Age, I managed to bump into devs at PAX and learn about, which is called Don't Look Down. So if you want to think about other games that are kind of similar to this, I would say The Climb and Climby, maybe even To the Top. It's another one of these games that's actually quite physically involved. You're moving your arms quite a bit. You're standing in one spot. You're not running around your room, and the tutorial cautions you not to do that. But this is one where, and I think they're really doing themselves a disservice with the trailer for those watching the video. I think both of the trailers that they've launched for this game, they need to talk to us and figure out how to actually record a proper trailer, because it does not do the game justice. Some of the flybys are cool, but the fact that you've got like 4 different areas with, let's say, I think it's like 9 or 10 different levels per, and you have to try to kind of like go as fast as you can, get the best time, grab a flag at the end. It's, as I said, it's really an involved thing. You've got spiky robots kind of coming at your face. You've got bees to watch out for. You get a jetpack shield that you can use, a saving grace in case you do fall. But some of the heights feel pretty damn cool in it. And this is one of those games where like you hope that the indie game is going to make you feel good, and it really makes you feel good. And I got a bit of exercise playing this. I was playing that a little bit earlier today. So that's by Catapult Games.
Nice.
It's launched on the 18th of April, so just a couple days ago. And price is £15.59. It's about $20. Actually, if I was the devs, I would have knocked that down to the kind of probably £12 and $16. But other than that, I would say that the game is brilliant. Really had loads of fun, and it's rare when I play a game that I'm not like satiated. And I definitely want to come back. Like that's one that I'm going to play tonight now because I just want to hit the next run of levels. It's kind of like when you sit down with Astrobot and you play like the first world and you're like, I need to see what the next world is going to bring. So big thumbs up to those guys.
I actually played this one a very long time ago because I now see the video. I'm like, oh wait, I played that. I think there is a free demo available on itch.io that you can try before you buy. I'm not sure if they still have it up there because I thought that demo was almost felt like the entire game for me because you could play like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 levels.
Only a caution though, I did notice. So some of the people who joined and were watching me earlier said that the kind of grip tracking and all that, like they've refined that so much that it used to be like really frustrating and that. It feels so freeing. I actually really like the pacing for when you're falling and stuff. So what you can do is you can like launch yourself into the air and it gives you enough forward momentum, not like a huge amount, but like enough that it's fair for you as a player. And it's not too punishing in the I've got to grab something while I'm falling. It gives you just a little bit of play so that you can like grab ropes before you crush to your death. And I like that. And you're not always hanging up. You can stand on the ground. You can't walk. I couldn't use the thumbsticks for any reason. But you could just grab your arms and fling around. So anyway, it's definitely one to check out. It doesn't look very pretty, but actually they don't need it. The game is really solid, and that's one that if they haven't thought about developing it for Quest yet, I'm sure they have. That needs to be on Quest. I want to play that game on Quest for sure. So anyway, that one I'm excited about. So that was Don't Look Down. Great name as well. The other thing I'm going to say here, so the next game, I'm not sure, Nathie, if you got a chance to play this one. Jupiter and Mars for PSVR. Jupiter and Mars. So this one is probably its closest cousin, is perhaps Echo the Dolphin, or Abzu, or more so than that Charles Dickens book, but they call this like a tale of two dolphins. And so that's where obviously the names come from. And I'll just read their little blurb out because I found this quite interesting. A tribe of whales known as the Elders have enlisted Jupiter and Mars to help undo mankind's legacy plaguing the oceans. From the producer of Luminace Electronic Symphony, surfacing on PS4 and PSVR in spring 2019. So that's the 22nd of April. That this thing is landing. So not long left now before this is available. It's $25, so a little bit up the price ladder. This is a PSVR exclusive for the moment. And it's a very interesting graphically and sonically. If you watch the trailer and listen to the music back, probably the audiophile in me wants to play this even more so than the visuals aside. I don't yet have a flavor for what the dolphins are doing, how they work with each other in contrast. I haven't seen kind of enough footage yet to get the gist of what's the core gameplay going to be like. But there's enough here for me to be definitely interested. Now I want to know where they took it.
Looks very interesting.
Kind of like Tron meets Echo the Dolphin. Yeah.
You guys remembered that synthwave you could create on Windows back in the days where you were playing a song and you went into this trippy tunnel and it was like moving with the music. That's kind of what this is like,
right?
But less trippy though. I did see people play it at PAX, but I haven't been able to try it myself yet. But this is one of those titles that brings you into the rhythm of music. It's like an artistic game.
Yeah. One thing I was going to say there, because I wouldn't have considered it if it was just me, but my wife is like quite terrified of like the depths, like in Subnautica and stuff like that. She will not.
Wait, okay, it's Subnautica. No,
okay,
like, that's like
before you know that there's horrible creatures there that are going to try and eat you. Even being underwater in a game without any problems undersea, she had that. So I just wonder if this game does anything to address that, because I know there's other people out there who don't like the depths, like it's one of their fears or whatever, like clowns and stuff. Are you the same, Rowdy?
I mean, it's not that I'm like, scared or I get like panic attacks, but it's like, even like being on the ocean, I'm always a bit like, I hope nothing goes wrong here. I don't want to be swimming here. Like, like just the idea of that there's like, millions of metric cubic tons of water underneath you and above you. That's like such a scary thought. Like,
Nah. After playing the Shark Cage demo on PlayStation VR, I never wanna see a shark again in VR. And back in the days with my DK1, I got eaten by so many sharks too, because then development rules weren't that strict yet, so they were just always eating you for some reason, and that's even scarier than just getting attacked. Getting eaten by a shark in VR, it's not great. Plus, I'm not delicious. Just saying, I'm not delicious.
Sylvan on Twitch, by the way, says that it has a name as well. It's called thalassophobia, which is correct, by the way.
Oh, right. Oh, fear of the open waters and that.
Fear of the sea and open waters and traveling on sea, I think, mostly.
Oh, brilliant. I like it. I mean, he's one of the guys who's been to my barbecue. I was going to say, just one quick personal story there, because actually the most terrified I think I've ever been in my life was just snorkeling out. Or I used to live in the Caribbean when I was a kid, from the ages of 10 to 15. So when I was like 14, snorkeling off of what was called the Wall. It's a 2,000-foot drop that divers love, because they just go down and they can explore the wall and things like that. But it's the shelf. It's a plate shelf. And the thing is, you're swimming out there, and it's all blue, and it's like, oh, it's Caribbean. It's beautiful, beautiful. All of a sudden, you cross what looks like a drawn line in the ocean, where it goes this horrible deep blue-black color. And it's
the temperature changes, right?
Temperature does change. And I've never in my life backpedaled with all the muscles in my body like I did then. And it's just something about the unknown, like looking up at you and you're like, oh, fuck, and just back up like crazy. So anyway, quick story from...
This is why you should go to swimming pools.
Go to swimming pools with no sharks.
Especially if you've seen that movie, The Abyss, you'll know exactly what that's like.
Anyway, all those movies, or The Meg. Just don't even watch any of these things. These are
Yes.
bad. The Meg. Is Meggles in chat? I hope so.
I like that one.
I was going to say, so last one here, and I know several of us have played this, is now launching on PSVR. It's a horror game, because we've been talking about lovely horror experiences. A Chair in a Room, Greenwater, is launching on PSVR. Now, this game has had a long tenure. And it was originally released, and this is the kind of production release actually. This was originally released on the Vive on the 5th of April in 2016.
Oh,
then later,
originally it came out on Google Cardboard.
What?
I said no way. Like a chair in a room, but it was a different game, because I remember me playing a chair in a room in Google Cardboard.
Wow. Okay. Because I played like an earlier version of this than when it released, because I think I played it about 2015. But it released formally on Oculus Rift 22nd of June 2017, and now 23rd of April 2019 we're finally landing it on the final console that we need to release this on. So it's a horror mystery game. A lot of people tout this as having a strong use of room scale, about a 3-hour long experience. And I'd say that if I go by Steam reviews and my own personal opinion, this is a bit of a mixed bag. There is some suspenseful horror in here. There is some good detailing of textures and objects and interactivity. And actually, it's not a game that I would say, I'm unhappy that I got to play, but it's probably one of those you do once and then you're kind of done. So at a price tag of $25, I think that's a bit high, if I'm honest. But what can I say? I'll just quote a guy from Steam here, because I like the, let's say, the real aspect of Steam quotes. And I think this guy nailed it for my feelings as well in terms of a chair in a room. So he said, this is Mighty Mouse on Steam, who gave the game 3 out of 5 stars in his rating scale. He said, great ambiance, escape room-esque, and immersive. And the downsides are it's pricey for the content, not actually as horrifying as it says, and relatively slow paced. And I felt the same. It kind of feels like Louisiana. Like if I was to take Louisiana and turn it into a game, that's a chair in a room. So what did you guys think of the original games when you played them? Are you kind of mixed on them? Did you like it a lot?
Well, slow, yes. That's what I remember.
Scared. I just remember being scared the entire game.
Being scared while everything goes so slow is the worst, terrifying thing you can go for. Talking about VR experiences that involve chairs, if you want a fun and colorful introduction to VR, Sideline the chair is great.
So good. That is such
classic.
It's classic, but it's one of those that I'm so glad didn't get cloned 100 times. The thing with Sightline is where you look is constant, and where you're not looking changes, and that's just like the whole underpin. I haven't seen anything else from Fruxius in a while. He's a Polish developer, and he made this, and it was really, really good back in the day. So if you can get a build that works on your headset, definitely try it. That's a great recommendation, Nathie.
It's
one
on
of my
Steam.
favorites. It like blew my mind. Is he selling it though? Do you know? Is it?
I think it's free on Steam. I do have to double check, but
Yeah. Good one though. And the final thing I'll say before giving it back to Mike, because Mike said this a bit earlier, just keep in mind 26th of April, if you have the Nintendo VR Labo kit, you're getting a bit of an important patch upgrade with Mario and Zelda. So I'm very keen to hear from the lads how they find those next week's show.
Me as well.
There you go.
Cool. Well, we've got two main topics today. First up is the Acer Ojo Concept D headset. We actually talked about something like this a little while ago back on the show in September. We talked about the Acer Ojo 500, which is the predecessor to this headset. It's spelled Ojo, O-J-O, but pronounced Oho.
Oho. Yes.
Oho.
Who's
Do you guys still remember what episode that was?
If you can guess in the chat, then you're a real OG. Yeah. But we actually joked back on that show that we thought it was the worst name for a VR headset of all time, and I don't think my opinion has changed that much since then.
I like it. It's a funny one too.
It's a terrible name. It's a terrible name, and also
if you're not Spanish speaking.
Yeah, if you're not Spanish speaking. For Spaniards, it's perfect because it means I. But other than that, it's like, what is the O?
So So the original Ojo. So the Ojo 500 is the one we talked about.
I gotta interrupt you there. One thing, they could do a Christmas release and do the Acer Ho. You know, for the Ojo. They could do a Christmas promo.
That is a great. You should work for their marketing team, I feel like.
Yo-ho. Sorry, Mike.
Yo-ho. The yo-yo edition, you know, the M&M version of this headset. Okay, let's
serious face now.
My days.
Sorry.
So yeah, the original Ojo 500 launched in November, was priced at $399 US. It's a Windows mixed reality headset, and it's actually the second headset from Acer in the Windows mixed reality platform. Yep. I checked this morning, actually, though, that just like the Samsung Odyssey, you can't buy the Ojo 500 in the UK or in Europe. Yep. It was only for sale in the US and only for sale via Acer's official website. So it wasn't even listed by Microsoft under their sort of Windows mixed reality range as a headset you could buy. So it kind of seems strange. Also on the Acer website, it was completely out of stock. So I don't know really how many Ojo 500s they actually sold.
Wait, so we missed the boat?
No, this was the original one, the 500.
Yeah, but then we still missed the boat because I
Has
never
anyone
knew...
tried this? Anyone?
Yeah, no one tried it. No. So now, 6 months later, they're bringing out their new headset, which is the Ojo Concept D. Again, super weird name. Don't know why.
Fucking weird name.
But the thing is about this headset and, you know, the Ojo 500 and the Ojo 500 Concept D is that the whole sort of design ethos around it was kind of interesting in that the whole front of the headset could be removed from the head strap and then...
Yeah, we did find it an interesting device.
Yeah.
We did find it interesting.
And that, you know, we thought, you know, you could upgrade a headset that way, or, you know, it could be used for like cleaning it. So that was kind of interesting. But let's talk about the specs of the new headset because it looks identical to the Qualcomm reference design headset we saw back at CES. So the same angled front cameras. It's only got 2 front cameras for tracking, by the way. Nothing's changed there. So the same Windows mixed reality tracking system. But the main feature, the new feature, is the higher resolution displays because the Ojo 500 had 2 1440 by 1440 panels, whereas the Concept D, the newer headset, has 2160 by 2160 panels, which is the same resolution as the brand new HP Reverb. So, you know, you're talking on parity with like the highest resolution headset you can buy in terms of the Windows mixed reality platform. So kind of interesting.
Impressive. Also in the chat, someone says VR Addict Videos, to be more precise. It has an IPD slider. Take my money.
Yeah, exactly.
I also saw someone else saying, Nom Dom said, oh no.
oh no.
But yeah, they're completely right in the chat. You know, the HP Reverb has a fixed display and a software-based IPD adjustment, whereas the Ojo Concept D has 2 displays that move around and has a mechanical IPD adjustment. So if that's important to you and you have like an IPD range that's kind of slightly out of the normal, which is around 64, then maybe this is the headset to go for if you're in the market for this kind of device.
Okay. So what does the D stand for?
No idea.
What does the F stand for?
FReality. Buck3131 is kind of like asking if you need a beast of a graphics card to run this HMD, this headset.
Yes, you will. I think really you want a 2080 to get the best out of it. This is
minimal.
This is recommended specs. Minimum was slightly less, but I think it's kind of pointless buying a headset like this if you don't have the recommended specs. Let's be honest about it.
Yeah.
If you're gonna spend $600 on a super high-end headset, you should invest in a decent graphics card.
You should have one already if you can spend $600 on a headset.
But I again, having gone backwards and done a lot of testing, post all these updates, ASW, and all the technologies that they've posted, I've been pleasantly surprised at how capable lower grade graphics cards are with modern headsets. So actually, if you are a bit of a cheap bastard like me, then buying the headset that you anyway have the money set aside for the new graphics card and seeing how it runs on your current 1080 Ti, then I still think that it might be worth a go if you're not doing anything stressing like encoding or streaming or other stuff.
I agree with that, but at the same time, when you're buying a VR headset, you should think a little bit about like maybe future proofing your device. The games that are being developed now and the games that were developed like a year ago, there's a huge difference in performance. I run everything still on a 980 Ti, so I'm no one to speak. But I am thinking about upgrading though.
Yeah, let's say sitting on the minimum is very tricky. It's always tricky to be sitting on the minimum because it works, but it also kind of doesn't. And you're always, you got to think creative. It's not like it doesn't work, but you would rather like to upgrade but if you don't have the money, sitting on the minimum, it's not bad, but it's also not great. And it's
trading comfort as well, right? In certain titles, like you won't if you don't have that headroom. And I don't mean physical headroom in a headset. I mean, if you don't have the extra bandwidth for the application to kind of breathe and give you the extra frames, you might find certain bits of applications underperforming as opposed to the whole thing, But
the nice part is you can always, because if you're buying a PC headset, you can modify in terms of software. So that way you can take down the costs and buy something that is maybe less, VR ready, but can still do the trick. And as I said, you can be creative. You don't have to spend loads of money to have fun in VR. It depends on what you prefer. So something I wonder with this headset, is this a headset for consumers or is this for B2B? Because the one from HP, for example, it's mainly focused towards the industry and not really the consumers.
Yeah, exactly the same deal with this headset. Mainly focused at B2B, but I think you'll have the option to buy it if you are an enthusiast level consumer. But again, I think if you're an enthusiast level consumer, really my advice to you right now would be hold off and see what Valve is doing first before you even consider dropping any money on anything else. Because we know that the Rift S is sort of establishing itself as like the kind of like the lower end headset, although it's got some fairly decent specs, but it's affordable at $400. We think the Valve Index is going to be up there with the sort of 600 to 800 range, so this kind of sits in that bracket. So again, you just got to be sort of a bit careful over the next few weeks. I would say hold fire.
You can only spend your money once, as they say.
Yeah.
You can spell it loads of times.
Okay.
Haven't you heard of a credit card? No, sorry.
But of course,
Rowdy shoots money with his Supreme gun.
Yeah, exactly.
Of course, the main sort of draw to this headset is the higher resolution, though. The 2160 by 2160 display is going to be like a super nice display. You tried it in the HP Reverb, a recent event, right, Nathie?
Yes.
And what did you think in terms of display? Is it something that you'd be interested in using for gaming or?
Yeah, well, it's a fine display for gaming, for simulators and stuff like that. It's just, as you said, there is such a big spectrum of VR headsets now that it would be smart to wait until everyone launches their HMDs, then see how well they do, then see what content they also bring and what the main audience thinks, and then you spend your money. Not right now, because it's tricky. It's tricky. It's like a gamble. You're gambling with money if you do it now.
And I still stick by that. Although resolution is, if it's increased, it's a nice bump up, and it's definitely noticeable. It's not my number one priority in terms of buying a new headset. The bump in resolution for me is not, because I have an HTC Pro, and the headset I actually still use the most is the Oculus Rift, the CV1. So even though my PC can run it, it's just I prefer the little bit of headroom, the little bit of more smoothness, the little bit more comfort of like playing a VR game compared to the bump in resolution. It is noticeable, I'm not gonna lie. But once you're immersed in a game, that small bump up in resolution, of course I'm not comparing a 1K to an 8K headset. Of course, I'm sure there's a big difference there. But a small bump in resolution is, for me personally, not worth only upgrading for.
I'm on board with you. I think that let's say a low resolution is not an immersion or deal breaker in any way. Talking about the Nintendo Switch that has a little bit of a better resolution than the Oculus Rift DK1, and it's still, you're totally in there. So again, doesn't matter, but it depends on you personally what you like,
Yeah, exactly.
Some people own a 4K TV and some people don't, and some people like to watch it that way, but some people don't. They don't care. So it's with everything, technology-wise. Some people have wireless ear buds, and other people have it with a wire, and they don't care either. So it's the same with headsets. It's the same story, same deal.
Yeah, so this headset's going to cost you like $600 roughly. We don't know the exact price, but it's got the same specs as the HP Reverb, so
it's
it would
the same kind of price too. So
yeah, exactly. But the thing is, the main sort of selling feature I thought was this headset is the fact that you could possibly upgrade it by just removing the lenses and the front panel, and then buying the upgraded version and then just slotting that on. But that doesn't seem like that's actually going to be the case. You can't just buy the new lenses with the new displays and then just slot it on your Ojo 500 if you bought that headset, if you could find one. That's not going to be the case. Apparently, this whole removable part of this headset, the reason why they do it is for businesses and high volume sort of traffic applications where they want to clean it and use it for hygiene reasons.
Yeah.
So it's not
Makes
for
sense.
upgrading, which is a shame, because that would be a really cool feature and something that I would probably look into and sort of buy into, especially if I knew that I didn't have to replace the head strap and the controllers each upgrade I wanted. I could just upgrade that module.
Yeah, because when you invest in particular the human interface aspect, right? Like you get your VR cover, you get your dual audio head strap or whatever, you get the head touching bit sorted. You do want the front end to be the bit that changes, right? And I suppose as technology moves on, there will be space for a modular headset. It'd be interesting to see who does well in that space eventually.
Yeah, actually, like if you look at it, like phones have been going on that route for like, it's never happened, but we've been talking about modular phones for like so long, where you can like shift out the camera and shift in a better camera, get a better process. That would be awesome. Like, but then of course nobody would buy a new phone; they would just buy upgrades. So.
And trouble with that is engineering, though, right?
Yeah,
like the way that the fine way they fuse the screen to the case and all that stuff now. Like, I don't think you'll see that going into a mobile phone in any.
And I'm still positive.
And you give people a reason to buy a new phone. If you can modify it, people will stay longer with what they already have.
That's why
a lot of money is getting made. Like Google Blocks was this project that they once had, and I don't know where it went now, but it's something. Anyways, Omnomdoms says it all makes sense now. Well, we're glad we could help you out with this Ojo.
Yeah. So that is the Ojo. We don't know when it's coming out. Likely priced around $600. Similar specs to the HP Reverb. But the main benefit is that it has mechanical IPD adjustment. So if that's your bag and you're a B2B business looking for a new headset, maybe this is the one you're looking for. But let's move on then to a new segment of the show. Brand new.
Brand new.
And I'm going to be passing it over to Rowdy because he's got this new segment of the show, and it's where Rowdy gives us a bit of science. Because little known fact about Rowdy is he's actually a scientist. You wouldn't believe it, but he is.
Don't hype it up now. Yeah. Don't hype it up, because I was about to start with saying like, oh, you have to understand, I'm not an expert on the matter. I'm just someone who's very interested in science in general. So I mean, I do read a lot and I do look a lot of stuff up. But yeah, I wanted to today talk a little bit about. Well, basically, I started out of thinking what is the ideal virtual reality display for our eyes. So I wanted to start with a couple of concepts, talking about refresh rate, frame rates, the difference between these kind of things, and start with that. And also explain just very briefly how our eyes work and how it's different from, for example, cameras and displays and screens. So I'll start with explaining what basically the difference is between frame rate and refresh rate. So the refresh rate, I wrote it down on the slide here as well, is basically the number of times in a second that a display hardware updates its buffer. Now, this is completely different from the frame rate because the refresh rate includes the repeated drawing of identical frames, while frame rate actually measures how often a video source can feed an entire frame of new data to a display. So you can have identical frames that are being displayed just because your refresh rate is higher. That's also why it makes no sense to, for example, have a monitor of 60 frames, of 60 hertz, but actually running a frame rate of 75 frames per second, because you can't beat the refresh rate of your monitor. Makes perfect sense. Also, I have a little bit of a video, but since we're running actually on a 720p stream, I don't really think it's going to be working as it should be. But it's basically a video that shows the difference between 60 hertz and 30 hertz, and it also slows it down. On the slow mo, you can probably see it better. Yeah. But you can see that the 60 hertz shows much more of a smoother image rather than what the how's it called, the 30 hertz actually does instead. Now, also on the right, I have an image with a mouse cursor, which shows the stepping effect. So if you move your mouse frame from left to right, you can basically see that there's an image that's going to come later as well. You can see that there's certain steps that the image is shown. So it doesn't show a continuous line, but the higher that the refresh rate of your screen actually becomes, the more likely you'll see a continuous kind of streak, which you see more on the 720 hertz rather than anywhere else. So that's basically what the difference is between refresh rate and between frame rate. Now, why does this actually matter? That basically comes from the old days with CRT monitors. They basically had a very high refresh rate, but they did that basically to get less flickering, something that is not really that much of a problem anymore with LCD and OLEDs because they usually use a higher refresh rate anyway. Now, another reason why this is very important is basically for motion, since we have different kind of, our brain basically interprets motion at the speed that it sees the images. So what we're basically doing is we're trying to fool our brain into seeing motion, but we're actually just seeing still frames. So if you run something in the top, you see a ball running at 5 frames per second, the frame rate is not high enough for our brain to see it as motion. It basically sees it as a single images that basically pop up every single time. At 15 frames per second, this is kind of like the magical number, because then our brain starts interpreting this as motion rather than as still frames that are being shown separately. At 30 frames per second, that affects us even stronger. So we see differences between these different frame rates for sure. Does that mean that anything above 15 frames per second is redundant? I think we all know the answer to that one. That is an obvious no. So there's a lot of people that are actually out there saying, especially if you go on Reddit and that kind of stuff, but our eyes can only see X frames per second. Some say 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second, especially console patents that say that kind of stuff. But that's just ridiculous. I mean, if you remember that we said at the beginning, we said that we fool our brain by representing images at a fast enough rate so that it perceives it as it is in motion. But that's not what actually happens in the real world, because we don't see frames per second. That's not how our eyes work. We see things at a continuous rate. So if you basically look at how our eyes work, they're not cameras at all. They do not capture still frames, because motion is something that is continuous. And the way that we
perceived vision is by either seeing direct light, such as a lamp, or the reflection of light. So that can be then objects that are reflecting light. So we have lamps that we can see, and we can see the reflection of light. Then that light hits the rods and the cones that make part of our retina, and they digitalize this signal, sending it to our brain, and then an image is formed, which is much more of an analog way of forming an image rather than a digital one, because it's more based on like how this signal is changing opposed to like the previous image that turned into. Now, in terms of like, I did some research on to like find out like what is like basically the maximum amount of frames per second that we can see. And there's also a big difference in between that, because I know that the United Air Force, they did a test with their pilots to see if pilots could distinguish small differences in light. And they did this by experimenting with a picture of an aircraft that was flashed on a screen at 1/220th time of a second. So that's 220 frames per second, basically, but just showing one frame. And the pilots were consistently able to see the after image, and they could also identify the aircraft. So this basically is proof that we can see frame rates that is way higher than 60 frames, 120 frames, 240 frames per second. So that's basically the proof. And I got this little video as well, but it's, again, we were only streaming at 30 frames per second. So you only see a very brief flash, but that's kind of imitating the test that they were doing. Now, in order to get real motion, we need to get far higher frame rates. But the higher frame rates that we get a little bit, they call it like the law of diminishing returns. So you can very clearly see the difference between 30 and 60 frames per second. But if you go to higher amounts of frames, between like, for example, 120 and 140, that becomes much harder to do it. I'm not saying it's impossible, since there are definitely people that can pick it out every single time, but that does make it a lot harder. So a lot of that actually depends on the scene that is being shown on the screen. If this is, for example, playing Hearthstone, then if you're playing it at 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second, that's not going to matter much. But if you're, for example, playing Counter-Strike or a game that is showing very high intensity scenes, there is a much larger benefit from this. Now, there's another thing as well. Movies are always shown at 24 frames per second. The majority of the movies are. There are some movies that have also experimented with this. For example, The Hobbit, they have shown it at 48 frames per second. But a lot of people find that really weird. So I tried to figure out why that was as well. And that actually has to do with two things. First is our brains are kind of trained to see movies at 24 frames per second. Because at 24 frames per second, what movies use a lot is motion blur. Now, there's a lot of confusion around motion blur, especially in games. But what motion blur basically is the streaking of moving objects in a photograph or a sequence of frames, such as a film or an animation. And it results when the image being recorded changes during the recording of a single exposure. So due to rapid movement or long exposure. And this results in a very natural motion effect, because our eyes themselves, they also work that way. Because if you hold your hand in front of your eyes and you move it at a certain speed, all of a sudden you will, yeah, exactly, everyone does it. Your eye will not be able to track it anymore. If you do it slow, there's no motion blur, but if you speed it up, you all of a sudden see motion blur because your eye is not able to track anymore. And that's what happens because our eyes move with saccades, so very quick eye movements in order to track it. We also have a smooth pursuit, which is another way of tracking with our eyes. And that is to eliminate motion blur. But when velocities of, I think, greater than 30 frames per second, then they will need to go into a saccade movement, which will introduce motion blur. And with games, it gets even more complex because a camera captures a moment over a length of time, which is the image that I've shown here. So you can condense that exposure into a static frame, introducing natural motion blur. But with video game graphics, they produce an immediate graphic snapshot of a point in time. It's basically a discrete frame, while with cameras and our eyes, we have a continuous frame, which is a large difference. But games do add motion blur artificially, but this is completely different as it's not captured by a camera or eye. But it's typically needed to get a more natural kind of effect. And it also, I'm not 100% sure of this, but I also believe it reduces eye fatigueness in longer play sessions. But to achieve natural motion blur, this is where it gets very interesting. We would need displays of incredibly high frame rates. And I'm talking about plus 1,000 frames per second of 1,000 hertz. Because real life basically has no frame rate. That's, like I said in the beginning, our eyes don't work that way. So we can never perfectly match reality, but we can achieve reality by getting up to that point with using a very, very high frame rate. There's some very interesting literature on there as well. I found a little bit of stuff on that on virtual reality as well, mainly coming from Oculus, who have been doing a lot of research on this. They've been introducing techniques like the black frame insertion, because if you remember with the initial DK1, and I don't know if it was still DK2, but you had a lot of streaking that was happening as well when you moved the image, and that was also a limitation of the refresh rate of the screen. So, and basically to eliminate that, they inserted black frames in between certain frames in order to reduce that effect. But motion blur in virtual reality, it's not that commonly used. And I found that interesting because I just said, oh, the natural way of looking at things just in life. But there's a big problem, and I found some really cool topics on it on Reddit. But there's a problem with VR headset, like I said before. They already introduce a lot of motion blur. That's why they did the black frame insertion. So it wouldn't make a lot of sense that they would try to introduce motion blur on a headset while they previously tried to eliminate motion blur. So that would take an enormous amount of processing power, and we're still limited by resolution. So to take away resolution from that to increase motion blur, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think that is the main reason. And there was also an article that I found from Michael Abresh himself that also goes into depth in this a little bit more. I'll read what he says. He says, if we could make the frame rate infinite, we could see exactly the same as our eye would perceive. But unfortunately, an infinite frame rate is not an option. But somewhere between 60 hertz and infinity, there must be a frame rate that is good enough so that the eye can't tell the difference. The question, of course, is, what is that frame rate? And there is no answer to that question at this point in time. They're doing a lot of research, of course, but there is no answer at the moment, because it depends a lot on the scene content, like we discussed before, the resolution, the field of view, the pixel fill, the display type, the speed of eye motion, characteristics of the eye. But you can tell for sure that 100 hertz is nowhere near enough. Even 200 hertz, it would be a significant improvement, but it would still not be enough. The sweet spot for 1080p at 90 degrees field of view is probably somewhere between the 300 hertz and the 1000 hertz.
Wow.
Although higher frame rates would be required to hit the sweet spot at even higher resolutions.
My poor graphics card, Jesus.
Stop making higher resolution displays. We first need to fix the 1080p. So a 1000 hertz display would very likely look great and would also certainly reduce or eliminate a number of other HMD problems, such as motion sickness, because it would interact with the visual system in a way that it mimics reality much more closely than existing displays. He has no way of knowing that for sure, because there are no 1000 hertz head-mounted displays, and he also doesn't expect there to be. Well, he was very brutal in this, actually. He says, and I don't ever expect to try it. So he doesn't see it happening anytime soon.
Damn it.
Yeah, exactly.
I know that Abrash say that. Abrash, when he says
NVIDIA
that.
is working a lot on like 600 hertz displays and that kind of stuff. So
wow.
I mean, we're gonna stay positive. So to conclude, the ideal VR display has a refresh rate that allows a frame rate that is so high that our eyes would perceive it as natural motion.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Applause. This was
Yeah, I love that.
beautiful. My eyeballs are ready here.
Yeah. So that was super interesting, Rowdy. I really appreciate you taking the time to do all this research for us, because I think it was really interesting. It's kind of one of those things that I really want to listen back to as well now. But the thing is that what it kind of made me realize is, on the conclusion of it, is that we really are like in like the very beginning of all this, you know, like we're so early. We're like the earliest of early adopters right now. And although we've got all these exciting things happening in our sort of like space, we'll look back in the future and sort of see how rudimentary it all probably was. And I can only just imagine what a headset in like 100 years would look like, you know, in terms of its refresh rate and resolution.
The thing that I found the most interesting is that, you know, a lot of people are like saying, the resolution needs to be higher and the resolution needs to be higher, but they don't realize the complications that come with like those higher resolution headsets. And I would much rather like Michael Abrash says himself, like, fix the 1080p resolution, get those high frame rates to get that much more natural kind of, because the resolution for me, I keep on saying it, it's not the big thing. Like, okay, higher resolutions are nicer, but if you can get more immersed or less motion sick from using, you know, lower resolutions, then I think that is a better way to go forward. And I really look forward to like the technology developing in that kind of direction. So, I mean, if there are any questions from you guys or from the chat, of course, like feel free to ask them. I'll do my best to answer them as best as I can.
In the chat, Meatball Saucy says, just finished a science fair project with my son on this exact same topic. Very cool, Rowdy. And then Victor Riddle says, I'm like Neo right now. I know frame rate kung fu. and some people said like, hey, where is Rowdy his lab coat? Where is Rowdy his like
I can only wear
apples
one
on the
outfitted
desk?
episode.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it becomes kind of like a cosplay party here. But people want you to dress up next time with all this.
Also interesting, since there's been like some confusion with like the 80 hertz and the 90 hertz. The reason why I don't see that much of a problem. Of course, higher is better, but the difference between 80 and 90 hertz it's not that big. You know, right. Like it's not like the difference between, for example, 30 and 20. You know, there's that law of diminishing returns, that the higher frame rates, they are better. Your eyes will become less fatigued probably because you get more natural motion, or closer to mimic reality. But it's the 10 hertz is not going to make the huge difference.
What you're basically saying is the gap between 80 hertz and 1,000 hertz versus 90 hertz and 1,000 hertz isn't that discernible.
Yeah, exactly. But it's a really interesting point that you make, in that, you know, we're pushing higher resolution all the time, all these different headsets. No one's really pushed higher than 90 hertz in terms of a refresh rate of a headset yet. So maybe over the next few years, we're going to see more headsets pushing refresh rate.
Also don't be fooled by those like TVs that like advertise like, you know, what is like 900 hertz, or like, because they use like a very shady technique, which is like interpolation of frames.
Yep.
So they're actually running out much lower refresh rates, but they basically like copying frames to like make it.
It's like ASW. But I am interested where we go with some of the new like RTX chips in that, because what we should be able to achieve, like what they've already aimed in the kind of white papers for this material is, you know, guessing that middle frame and guessing what the frame after that would be, and guessing. So there might actually be a kind of a digitized equivalent of stepping from frame A to frame B, and then if your hardware can handle that refresh rate, which I don't think, to Mike's point, current hardware can. If there was a headset that could achieve 1,000, even if it was only actually producing and rendering 100 of those frames, the interpolation using the neural network on the RTX chip might actually be able to give you that feeling, you know, 10, 20, 30 years before it would actually hit the market. And you might not be able to discern the difference between that and the real thing.
And the funny thing is, something similar kind of happened with older hardware, especially on the PlayStation 2, because they introduced, like, to get like more like a natural effect, they introduced motion blur for the first time there. And as people who played on the PlayStation 2 and played those games with motion blur, it was awful. And the main reason for that was because the frames per second that they were pushing was not high enough for it to be perceived as natural. So they were pushing technology that just wasn't. If they would do that now, and because motion blur throughout the years in games has improved a lot. Like, I mean, a lot of people still turn it off because of that era, but motion blur itself is not a negative thing. It's something natural, something that needs to be there in order to be perceived, because we can't reach those 1,000 frames per second. If we would reach 1,000 frames per second, our eyes would naturally create, or our brain would naturally create that motion blur, because our eyes wouldn't be able to track anymore every frame.
Chat said this earlier, and I wanted to repeat this because I felt this as well. The brand said, this is awesome information. Like, it's really good to hear this. I think it's a nice sidestep from the podcast, different from the norm. Applaud you for the professional presentation that we got. That was really nice.
Thanks.
Coming across. I mean, for those who don't know, my background is electronic engineering. So actually a lot of the stuff like the semiconductor labs and that, where Oculus have set up in Cork, some of my buddies are like going for those jobs in that because if they're 10 years in semiconductor, and that's where Oculus is employing. So it's all really well connected here, and I think that for me, again, with that history, it's a really exciting thing to hear about. Like that kind of detail, some people might get turned off to, but I'm the absolute opposite. Like I hear that and I just go, you just talked about this 15 hertz rule. I now want to know more, and I want to know if there's any parity between that and like this 16 beats a second Beat Saber crowd who are able to somehow both sample that with their eyes and achieve those kinds of scores. So anyway, I'm going to have to do some research in the background on the back of that. But excellent job, Rowdy. Really well
absolutely. And I think, it's something that we want to do more of in the future. It's not going to be every episode, but like maybe like once a month, maybe twice a month.
And if the chat has any topics where they would like to know more about, then feel free to drop them, and then I'll take a look at them as well.
They were constantly talking about audio as well, spatial audio. So that's one that is very hot as well. But I think these opportunities of talking about hertz, for example, are usually not on the horizon. All these companies selling VR headsets are just putting the amount of hertz in the specs list on Amazon, eBay, or wherever, and people have no idea. I came from film school, so I know how hertz works and stuff like that. But if you never went to school to learn that stuff, or you get to hear Rowdy talk about it or somewhere else, then you have no idea what you are buying into. And that's why you saw so many people panic, for example, with this Rift S, like, oh, it's 80 hertz. But then there are other people say, like, yeah, but I have a headset with 72 hertz, and I have one that is 90 hertz, and I have this one, I have that one. So having this kind of breaks that, and then you're like, well, it's not that bad. And now I finally understand what this means. And then it's different the way you think about it. So.
In the grand scheme of things, we're at the very beginning anyway, so a fraction of a difference is going to make any difference. And we noticed that when we had hands-on with the Rift S anyway. But yeah, it's been a super interesting show, and I really appreciate you putting the effort in, Rowdy. So
no problem. Yeah, my pleasure.
Thanks again, dude. If you have got any questions, now's a great time while I wrap up the show, and just to remind you that this is a weekly VR, AR, and MR talk show, live streamed every Saturday on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch. Tune into the show live at 7 p.m. in Europe, 6 p.m. in the UK, 12 midday in Central US. If you want to catch up with the audio version, you can check it out on iTunes, SoundCloud, and on Anchor. Leave us a nice review and subscribe to our YouTube channel if you enjoy the show, so you get updated when we go live next week.
And slam a like on this video.
Do that as well. So if you've got any questions, now's the time.
Yeah, I saw some people that were talking about the PlayStation VR saying it was 120 hertz, which, if I'm correct, they run it at 60 frames per second, but it's reprojected to 120, which is, again, it's not the same thing. It's a very different thing still.
You're absolutely right. And this is something that I talked to Ubisoft about when I visited their office to check out Space Junkies on the PSVR, because I was super interested in how it ran on that console. And he completely confirmed that it does actually run at 60 frames per second on that headset. So again, when you start talking about hertz and frames, when I play the PSVR, I don't think, this is really weird experience. I just enjoy the game, so good point. Good point. Well made. Yeah.
Well, that's that. One final thing I'll mention, just because it's their last week of their Kickstarter campaign, Mike, is Firmament, the guys behind Abduction.
Nice.
I did actually get to play that a little bit earlier in the week, and you threw me the way of the birds earlier, so I didn't get a chance to talk about it. I won't say much, other than the devs had provided me a kind of alpha build, which wasn't complete, but what was there was really tantalizing. And I've actually urged the team. I said, look, guys, if you're trying to get money through, and they've still got like 300 grand to raise on a 900 grand. I mean, they've already raised a huge chunk, but they're only 2/3 of the way there. And I think it would be a huge shame, because Abduction was a fantastic game. This is the creators of Rift, Cyan. And I was really smitten with the little cube companion thing that hovers. It's like a magic 8-ball, and it hovers, and you grab it, and then you use it as this object. It almost becomes like this companion of yours just in this early demo. But the sound design, the levels, you felt like you were standing on top of the Himalayas in one segment, and it's all what Cyan are known for, like gorgeous environments. And the worst part about it is I had this sinking feeling as I was approaching the end of the demo, and I was like, this might be a game I don't get to play, and I hate that feeling. It's the same thing that I know Nathie and I have felt back in the DK1, DK2 days. If you play something and you're like, this is a beautiful design mechanic, I want this later, and I really hope that they can get some more backers behind them. And if this Kickstarter doesn't work out for them, I hope they can formulate a plan that does allow them to bring Firmament, because I didn't know about it for like months and months and months. I'd heard about it, and then it kind of went quiet again, and I heard about the Kickstarter. But it's a game that really is deserving. And if you're into puzzles, the kind of puzzle environment that isn't so like you're not being led by your nose, Firmament is another game that just deserves to be out there and be made. So I just wanted to give them a little bit of a platform there at the end of the show to say, check it out, guys, if you haven't. I think PD's just linked the project there.
Hopefully they can get funding in some way, maybe work together with Oculus Studios, or maybe getting a bit of money from Sony to do an exclusive on the PlayStation platform. I don't know, but hopefully there are some options for them.
They're currently sitting at $960,000 or 814,000 euros out of their 1.1 million goal.
Well, that's a lot closer than the last time I looked at it. We could actually push this thing over. Sweet.
It's just because you spoke about it, just went up.
Just after a few seconds, there you go.
Yeah, like 100K, bam, here, bam. But again, thanks, Rowdy, for blessing my 4 eyeballs with your amazing story. I really enjoyed it.
Yes. If you did enjoy the podcast, let us know. If you want to hear more from Rowdy talking about sort of scientific and getting in depth with some of these subjects, and again, let us know in the comments of the video once it's live, or post us a message on Twitter. We'd really appreciate it. We hope you have a great week in VR. Fingers crossed, some news on the Valve Index. We'll keep you posted next week if we do hear anything.
Please.
Have a great week. Get hyped for the Quest. Coming soon. See you next week, and bye-bye for now. Take care. Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. See ya.